relationships look different now more than ever. The current circumstances we all find ourselves in have taken a huge toll on the relationships around us, even the closest ones. How do we restore those relationships, and what is God's plan for us when it comes to our connection with Him and others? Let's find connection in the midst of change.
You are my best friend. I'm so excited to spend the rest of my life with the woman of my dreams. I promise you from this day forward to serve you with my whole heart, to always be there for you when things don't go as planned, but to laugh with you in all the joys that life brings, to always pursue you and never stop falling in love with you, to dream alongside of you and always live an adventurous story, to encourage you and lift you up in all circumstances, and to be faithful to you all the days to come. I love you so much, and I'm so honored to be the man you have chosen to marry. Don't all of us want to hear words like that on the day that we're prepared to spend the rest of our lives with the spouse that we're choosing? We spend time celebrating and hanging out together with friends and family, cutting cake, sharing dances, taking pictures. And we all had the best intentions in that moment, don't we? Those moments quickly fade, though, after a wedding is over. And you know what stinks about weddings sometimes? Is that we make these big statements, we make these big promises, we set these big expectations, and they sound so great on the wedding day. But here's the problem. We eventually find ourselves having a hard time living up to those promises that we make. For those of you who just heard those words that I read, those were the vows that I read to my wife some 8 years ago on our wedding day, sharing together our wedding for the rest of our lives. And while I love those words that I wrote and I go back to them often, to be honest with you, I have found it really hard to live up to those vows every single day. You see, what happens after the big magical wedding day is that those promises turn into unmet expectations. And after that, our spouses end up not holding up to their end of the bargain. Tragedies hit when we didn't expect them. Miscommunication happens. Somebody's misunderstood or underheard. Brokenness of trust happens. Poor decisions take place. And all of a sudden, we're left picking up the pieces of this thing called marriage, and we're trying to figure out how to put it all back together. Because you know this if you're married, because I know this because I'm married. Here's a very big true thing about any marriage is this. Marriage can be one of the most rewarding and most difficult relationships that we will ever encounter. It can be one of the most rewarding things that you ever experience, but it can also be one of the biggest struggles that you will have in your life. And so many of you are asking, where are we going today with this? What does this look like, and how do we restore our marriage back to where it needs to be? Well, today, that's what we're going to spend the next few moments talking about, of how to restore the relationship of marriage in our lives again. And maybe some of you are already checking out because you're like, listen, I'm not married, and I could care less about talking about that today. But listen, what we're going to talk about, the points and thoughts that we're going to share, while they're incredible for marriage, they can also be applied in whatever relationship you find yourself struggling with today as well. Maybe you're dating somebody and you're trying to figure that out. Maybe you want to be married one day. These are great things for you to learn. Maybe you're engaged to that person and you're like, what am I signing up for? Maybe you've been divorced and you're trying to figure out how to restore your relationship back again and maybe be able to marry somebody again. Wherever you find yourself today, I hope this conversation is helpful no matter what relationships that you're facing today. And for those of you, this is your first time with us, welcome. So glad that you're here. My name is Trey. I'm one of the teaching pastors here, and it's an honor and privilege to be able to communicate with you today and have this conversation. But it's also, just to be real with you, this series, I feel like, is one of those series that I hope hits home with you and what you're going through. Because all of us have had relationships in our lives fall apart. Especially over the last few months and year, things have changed. They look different. And our relationships, those closest around us, have taken a huge toll. And so we're all trying to figure out, what do we do about it? And so there's been a shift. And that's why we're calling this series RelationShift, because a lot of those important, close relationships around us have shifted and look different than ever before. And we want to figure out, how do we do relationships better? And how do they get back to where they need to be? And so maybe you have some relationships around you that are important to you. And I hope over the next few weeks we cover all of those relationships to help us all feel reconnected to each other again. Because here's what the word shift means. Just to give you a little bit of definition, a shift means to exchange for or replace by another, to change. Everybody say change. Some things have changed, right? They've shifted. To change the place, position, or direction of, to move, or to make a change in place. And I thought this word fit the way that I felt about my relationships this year, that things have changed. I've replaced the great relationships I've had by false relationships that aren't really helping me connect anymore. They've changed in place and position and definitely direction, because I'm not as close to the people as I want to be, the ones that were closest to me. And so we're all trying to figure this out and how to put the pieces back. And today we're going to talk about the relationship of marriage and how to do that better, because if we're being honest, we've been around our spouse longer than we ever have before, right? Those who are married, you've experienced this. You've probably stepped on each other's toes more during this last few months than you ever have before, because you're around each other more. Some of you are working from home together, and you got your kids, and it's like a big circus at your house every week. Some of you, are doing Zoom calls and meetings and not knowing when to, work needs to stay at home or, stay at work and not bring it home. Some of us are still trying to figure out, well, what do I do? Like, how do we grow in our relationship? It just feels kind of stale. Anybody feel that way in their marriage a little bit? Well, I know we have. And my wife and I, we have tried to figure out over the last few months how to help our marriage continue to grow and thrive during the midst of change. Because here's what I've experienced, and maybe you have too. We talked about this last week, our relationship with God. Here's what some marriages have done. Some have become closer. You've spent a lot more time together, so your relationships have gotten better, and you've probably say, man, our marriage has never looked this good. Like, we're in a great place. But others of you, you've pulled away. You stopped communicating. Things were different, and so your relationship got different, and you're trying to figure out, what does it look like to move forward together? Or maybe it's a mixture of both. Maybe there's areas that you've gotten better and closer in, but there's other areas that you've pulled away and a bit emotionally or physically distant. And some of those places, that's what we're going to spend some time talking about, of how to grow in those places again. And so if I were to ask you a really honest question today to answer amongst yourselves or between you and your spouse, here's the question I want us to wrestle with today. It's this: how is your marriage doing? How is your marriage doing? Because your marriage doesn't just affect you, does it? It affects your kids, it affects your grandkids, it affects other people around you that you work with and your friends. People see you and they're looking at what your marriage looks like. And so how is your marriage doing? And how would you answer that question amongst yourself? Would you say it's doing good, it's struggling, it doesn't exist, it's kind of weird? I don't know how you would describe your marriage. I know how I would describe mine today. But in order for us to heal, we talked about last week, we have to get real. We have to be honest with ourselves. And so if you and I are going to get the help we need to reconnect these relationships back to where they need to be, we're going to have to be real about how they are right now. And so answer that amongst yourselves. You don't have to, talk about it now, but just think about it over the next few moments as we talk about some of this stuff together. And let's look at the original design. What did God have planned with marriage from the beginning? And we looked last week back at God's original intent with mankind when he created man and woman, and he created the earth and everything among it. And then after that, in Genesis 2, we see kind of the first talk of a relationship of a marriage. And here's kind of what this passage says. Genesis 2:24. It says, "That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become" what? One. Everybody say one. One flesh. And so that's where we see that in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, we see a similar passage. Check this out. Mark 10, 8 through 9 says this, and the two shall become what? One flesh. There's the word one again. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. And see, I love these passages because it does give us an idea behind the intent of what God wanted to do. He wanted to take two different people, bring them together in a marriage relationship, and allow them to do life together and have a relationship that was so different and unique than all the others that were going to exist on the earth. The problem is when you bring one very different person over here and this different person over here and try to bring them to create one flesh, it's easier said than done. Because you're taking, I always say this at marriages that I perform, you're taking two very different people who live different lives, two different people who do finances differently, two different people who, can I be honest with you? They fold their toilet paper differently, right? I didn't know that was a thing, you know? Two different people that wash clothes differently. Two different people that do chores differently. Two different people that eat two different kinds of food. Some people that stink and some don't. I mean, you're bringing these two different people together, right? And you're trying to make them one flesh? Like, how does that even sound possible? Like, what was God thinking? Like, was he just kind of having an off day when he wrote these verses and wanted us to live this out? Or is there something deeper? Is there something so special about a marriage that when these two people choose to become one, that God can do something so different in their lives that they would have never experienced before? And I think that's what God was doing. Even though it becomes very difficult at times for us to manage, I think we can do it. I think we can make this possible, but it's going to take some work and intentionality on our behalf. Because once we choose to walk down the aisle and say, I do, and choose to make these big promises, it's up to us to try to figure out how to live them out from there. And you and I, we've seen marriages that work, and we've seen marriages that don't work. And the marriages that aren't working right now, they're full of boredom. They're full of disrespect. They're full of people that there's some trust that's been broken. There's a lack of love and luster that used to be there. There's people that have stopped listening to each other and focus on themselves. And we've seen marriages like that, ones that are struggling, but we've also seen ones that are thriving and working well. And so what does a marriage look like in the midst of change? How does it work and what does it look like? Well, my wife and I, we had the opportunity to gather with a lot of couples over the last few months in small groups. And if you're not in a small group, let me tell you, they are life-changing. For us during the pandemic, not being able to leave the house, not being able to see friends, just being able to connect online with other couples that were going through stuff in the church like we were, it was an incredible experience for us. And it did just as much for our marriage as it did for their marriages. And we loved being able to hang out with them. And we learned a lot from them, and hopefully they learned from us as well. But I asked a few of them if they would be willing to share with you guys some struggles that they've gone through, good and bad, during this time. And so they sent some videos to us, and I want to share those with you today so you can get kind of a real-life sense of what other people have been through, and maybe you can relate to this as well. So take a look at this video.
I'd say a positive way, we are more in sync. We say, actually finish each other's statements many times. And
more than we did before.
Yeah, way more than we did before. And one of our favorite things to say is get out of my head, get out of my brain. So we support each other much more in many ways. And as Brooke would love to say, we are much better BFFs.
BFFs.
But
and we also learned to support each other better, I think. Not that we didn't before, but I think this has helped us learn to support each other better and more what we need from each other.
But then a negative would have to be the separation of and differentiation of work versus home time. Now, it used to be you could, as soon as you walk in the door, or
work
even,
is over.
Work is over. Or the moment you leave your office, work is over. And you have that time between leaving work, getting home to kind of release all of that. And then when you get home, it's home time. Now we don't really have that anymore. There's a lot of gray area as to when you stop working and when
You have to remind each
Yeah.
other sometimes, you're home now, stop answering emails, stop answering your phone, and just be home.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the worst one.
The past year has affected our marriage in both positive and negative ways. Positive, I would say, because we've gotten to spend more time together.
Yes.
And we've been able to spend more time with the family and have family dinners. But probably the negative way would
We
be
spend too much
too
time
much time together. So if you're used to, I travel for work and not being together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then I guess things can get on your nerves that maybe you didn't really realize could be a problem, like little things, clutter, making a dinner decision every single night.
Making dinner.
And so I think that's probably been the hardest, is just to find a new normal and get comfortable with a new routine each day. And also, for me, kind of feeling like it's the same routine each day without any breaking it up.
Yes, I agree.
Great stories, right? Anybody can relate to their stories and what y'all have been going through over the last year? I know for us, we can definitely relate as they were sharing their stories in group with us. But hey, guys, if there's any advice that I can give you today that you can walk away with, Kevin's statement at the end, yes, I agree. Yes, you're right. Guys, if you just learn that phrase, life will be better. I'm just saying, that right there will save your marriage a ton of heartache. But there's some other things I want us to learn today, too, that will help us along the way and really get back to the marriages that God has created and called us to live in. And Kirsten and I, my wife, we have had such incredible opportunity to be around great marriages. And we've learned from some incredible people who've had a lot to teach us and show us over the years. We've gone to several conferences and trips, and we've learned a lot. And so that kind of stuff we had to resort back to during this time. Things that we've learned, we had to start putting into practice again, because it was hard during this time to keep our marriage strong. But these things, hopefully, as they helped us, will help you as well. They were just great reminders for us. The first big thing that we were reminded of during this time, because we were so close and arguments did happen a lot sooner and faster than we anticipated them to, was we learned and had to be reminded that we have to fight for your marriage, not just in your marriage. You have to learn and establish to fight for your marriage, not just in your marriage. Because we know if you've been married 2.3 seconds, fights are going to happen. Disagreements are going to come, but it's how we handle those disagreements in our marriages that make all the difference in the world. If we learn how to fight fair with each other, when disagreements come and tough conversations, because they will, and it is healthy to have those tough conversations. If you've gone so long without having a tough conversation, you're probably hiding something that you should be sharing. And so when these disagreements come, the thing is we have to learn how to fight fair with each other, because we know we're going to fight in our marriages. It's just the point that in those fights, are we going to choose to fight for the marriage? And so here's some things we learned as we were talking about this with other people that help them and hopefully to help you as well. Some ways to fight fair. The first thing is, it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it. It's not just about what you say. You may have all the right words and say the right things, but it can be your tone or the way you're coming across or your facial expressions or your lack of facial expressions. Those things go a lot into the way that we communicate with each other. Just like any other relationship out there, we have to make sure that we're clear about what we're communicating and that we're fair in that communication. One of the things I learned with my wife early on is I can be a very boisterous person. I'm very outgoing and lively, and sometimes that can freak her out in the midst of a tough conversation, because if I raise my voice, it's because I'm passionate about something and I want to share it with her. And to her, it's like, why are you yelling at me, homeboy, right? Like, we are in the midst of our home. Like, put the megaphone down and let's just talk this out. And so we had to learn that in our marriage because of her past and some of the things that she went through with her family. Yelling resulted in her clamming up and not wanting to talk. And so I had to learn to approach our disagreements a little bit differently. I had to be calm and collective. And man, if you know as a guy, it is hard to go into a heated discussion, not heated, right? But I had to learn how to do that and come in and be the husband that she needed me to be in those moments because I wanted to fight for our marriage. I didn't want to just fight in it. Another thing that we learned is that there should be no name calling. When you're fighting or in a disagreement with somebody, you shouldn't go, you this and that this, and you never this and you never that. Those things aren't beneficial. All they are is making you look like an idiot in the midst of the fight, right? Because you're not honoring each other anymore. All you're doing is putting each other down. And so when you have those name-calling moments, you have to pull that back and not dishonor your spouse that way by choosing to honor them and uplift them instead of going to the negative. The next thing is don't keep bringing up the past. It's easy to go back to the way things used to be or bad habits or things that have happened in our past or past hurts that we've experienced. But once you've talked it through and gone through it, move on. Talk about something new. So when the next disagreement comes, just talk about that disagreement. Don't bring it back to when, he didn't pet your dog long enough or something like that when y'all were dating, because that doesn't help anybody. But what does help is when you're able to talk about the present conversation and not put each other down. And lastly, put yourself in the other person's place. I think it's so hard for us to do that because we come with our point of view and our perspective. When things aren't going right, we just want ourselves to be heard. But you know what? There's another person on the end of that disagreement. There's a person that deeply cares about you, that you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with. So let's remember that person in the midst of those disagreements. And it's okay sometimes just to say, time out, this ain't going well. We need a break. We need to cool off. Let's come back to this in a moment when we can calm down a little bit. Timeouts are okay. As long as they don't go on for like a year, I think you're good. But other than that, take moments where if you're getting in a heated discussion, you need a break, take a break. These are great practices that we put in place during this pandemic time to help us manage and grow in our marriage. And hopefully, those things can help you as well because we see people around us giving up too soon. We see people that we used to go to school with and things that happen and people giving up. And not only are they affected by it, their kids are affected by it, future generations are affected by it. And enough is enough. We have to learn to work together better. And I know for the sake of our children, I'm going to do whatever it takes in the sake of my wife to stay in the fight for this, to not give up when things get hard, and to make sure to always choose to pursue and validate the other person even when I don't feel like it. And so those are things, hopefully that will help you. The next big thought is this. This one hits at the core of a little bit of who we are. It's we need to focus more on we because that's more important than me. Focusing on we, the relationship, more important than me, my selfish desires. If anything that has happened during this time, I think we've all realized, whether we like to admit it or not, how selfish we are, right? I mean, we are some selfish people. We like things our way, and when things don't go our way or on our time frame, man, it just makes us focus on ourselves even more. But you know what happens in marriage when that happens? Is there's another person that is completely being neglected in the process because all you're focused on is you and yourself and your problems and everything you have going on. And while those things are important, we have to remember that we have another person on the side of that conversation. I love this passage, Matthew 20:28, because as Christians, we should strive to be the example of Christ in our marriages. But oftentimes, we're the exact opposite in those harsh moments. But here's what Jesus came to do, and hopefully it will help us understand what we're here to do as well, no matter what relationship we're facing. Here's this, Matthew 20:28. It says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. Everybody say serve. And to give his life as a ransom for many. You see, Jesus was the ultimate example of how to treat somebody else. He chose with all his power, with all his glory. I mean, the dude is the Son of God, right? Like, he can do whatever like that. And all of a sudden, he's like, I'm going to choose to serve you? Like, That's like a very low position on the totem pole here, Jesus. Like, why would you do that? And he did it because he wanted you and I to see something different, that this is who God is. This is what God is about. God is love, and love is through serving. And if we're going to choose to love our spouse better, we're going to have to choose to serve better. But it's hard, right? When we're focusing on what I want, I didn't get what I need, and we turn into little babies because we don't get what we want. And then we wonder why our marriages are falling apart because we stop serving. We stop taking care of each other. And Jesus gave that example to you and I so that we can start thinking about something differently. Hence, the we is better than the me. And we also need to remember this, the God factor that holds our relationship together. I think it's so easy just to get mad at our spouse or things aren't working, so we're just going to give up. But the thing is, we have a power inside of us that God has given us, his spirit inside of us, to give us the things to help us in our time of need. So when we're not doing well, when things aren't going well, we got a direct source to go to. The problem is we go to the wrong sources to get the healing we need instead of going to the right source. And so if I'm seeking God and my wife is seeking God, then together, God can help us no matter what comes along in our marriage. But the we has got to be more important than the me. And I know that's a hard thing for us to accept, right? Nobody wants to say, hey, I'm the selfish person in the room, right? But if we're all honest with each other, we're all that person. We're all so focused on us that we miss out on people around us that need us. And here's what marriage is. Marriage is more about giving than it is getting. Marriage is more about giving than it is getting. And you and I have to come to grips with this. Because a lot of us, we would love to get. And some of us go into marriage going, it's all about me, it's what I want, it's what I need. I can't wait to marry that person. They're going to fulfill all my desires. It's going to be awesome. But guess what? That's not what God intended marriage to be. He did this so we can give to one another. We can serve each other. We can make each other better people. And so I was reading a book this week of habits to establish in a marriage and why marriage doesn't work. And I loved this quote. It said this, one of the saddest reasons a marriage dies is that neither spouse recognizes its value until it's too late. Saddest reason a marriage dies is that neither spouse recognizes its value until it's too late. God gave us this gift of marriage. And there's so much value to be found in it. But a lot of the times we just continue to look at all the negative things instead of seeing the positive value that it adds to our life. And if you with your spouse, you know the value they add to your life. You know the great things that come out of you because of your spouse. And so we have to remember that. We have to remember that we, the relationship, is more important than what I want, the we. And I know that's a hard pill for us to swallow, but at the same time, if we want our marriages to work and be reconnected again, that's what it's going to take. Which leads me to my last thought for us today, is this. Don't stop doing the small things. Don't stop doing the small things that made your marriage work in the beginning, because here's the truth about it. Don't stop doing the small things, because the small things end up becoming the big things. The small things end up becoming the big things. I learned this very early on in our marriage, more by trial and error than anything, because it was one of those moments like every birthday, anniversary come around, and I wanted to make it the best birthday or anniversary yet. The problem is 3 or 4 years into marriage, I ran out of ideas, right? So I didn't know how to top the next anniversary or top the next birthday gift. And so a lot of the time, I'd be thinking, I'm like, hey babe, I just don't know what to do for your birthday this year. And I remember her saying things like this, it'd be nice if you would just text me throughout the day to check in on me. It would be nice for you to bring me my coffee like you used to and make it all perfect the way you do and bring it to me. I loved when you did that. Oh, so you don't want the unicorn jumping out the rainbow for your birthday? I really had this whole thing planned, right? But it's the small things. And I didn't realize that because I'm a big picture person. I want everything to be woohoo. But that wasn't what was making the difference. The things that were making the difference was the small daily things that kept our marriage strong. And the things that I noticed that my wife was needing that I chose to do. And the Bible, it's so great about this. It gives us a list. Like, how many of you are list people? Like, you don't go to the grocery store without one, right? Like, the Bible literally gives us a list. A guy named Paul, he's an earlier follower of Christ, writer of much of our New Testament, writes this letter to this church, and it's a love chapter. If you've been to any wedding, you've heard this verse before. And here's what the instructions are. And you've heard this. You could probably recite it in your sleep if you've ever heard it. But let's just listen to each word very carefully today. Listen to some of these words and see if they describe you. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes. It always perseveres. Love never fails. What a beautiful passage of Scripture, right? And a lot of us, because we're so overfamiliar with it, we just write it off. Like, oh, what a great list. Yeah, that's exactly what love is. Well, the Bible teaches that God is love, and he's given us the ability to love. And so he gives us this list to show us how to love each other well. But back to my question. Just because you know this verse doesn't mean we live out this verse. How many of you this would describe you? That love is kind. Are you kind? Are you patient? Are you not proud? Are you not easily angered? It's the small things, guys. It's the small things. This is such a simple list, isn't it? I mean, just to be patient with one another. How many of us have completely lost our patience, during this time? I don't even know if I had 5% left the other week from all the things that have happened. We've all lost our patience. How about kindness? How about just treating your spouse kind? That's a great place to start, right? These are such simple, easy things. And we could just study this passage for the rest of the year and work on this, and that would probably help our marriages tremendously. Honestly, it would help any relationship that we're in. But does that list describe you, or are there some attributes that you need to put into practice from this list starting this week? I know I do. I know as I was reading that doesn't describe a lot of who I am right now, and that needs to change. Because I know if I change, if I can do the small things better, it will make our relationship better. And so for us, in the midst of all the change around us, what are we going to do about it? Are we willing to do the hard work? Are we willing to fight for our marriage? Are we willing to focus on we instead of me? And are we willing to do the small things? Because if we are, I think we'll see a change no matter what we go through. If we're not, I don't think we can really expect much to change. But it was funny the other day, my wife and I were riding in the car a few months ago, and I just had the radio on. We're talking back and forth a little bit, and I look over, and she's bursting in tears. And I was like, oh no, what did I say? Did I put my foot in my mouth? I didn't even use 5 words today. What did I say? And so, I asked the awkward question that every husband asks, you okay? She said, yeah, I'm fine. I just read this article. And I was like, wow, what kind of article were you reading? You need to pick something happier to read if this is what it's causing you to do. And she's like, no, it was the most beautiful thing. And she's like, do you want me to read it to you? And I'm like, it's a 50-50 shot there, right? Do I or not? I don't know. Sure, yes, you can read it to me. And so she began to read me this article that she found. And immediately, I started to melt. And it wasn't just allergies. And I found myself in a place really evaluating how I've been as a husband recently. And so we're both crying in the car, and I'm trying to drive. I'm a wreck, and I'm like, I love you. And she's like, I love you. And I wish we could hug it out, but we can't right now. But, arm pat. But I want to read the article with you today. And hopefully it will have the same effect on you as well, because it helped us change our perspective when it comes to our daily interaction in our marriage. And here's what the article reads. The day my husband left earth for heaven, all my marriage problems vanished. There was no one to fuss at, negotiate with, or play possum at bedtime with. See, marriage is designed to be a reflection of Christ's love for his people. It's supposed to be a beautifully harmonious and intimate relationship. How often I screwed that up by bickering and manipulating. I wanted a perfect husband who acted how I wanted. And if that didn't happen, well, jerk wife went into full effect. If only he could understand how right I was and how wrong he'd always be. I needed to instruct him, to question him, and to remind him of all his shortcomings. After all, I was his helpmate. The reality is, I wasn't helping him or our marriage. By pointing out each fault, I was poisoning the relationship. Oh, it was still a good marriage and we deeply loved each other, but it wasn't what it could have been. And now, it's too late. Days after his funeral, I stared at our dirty clothes basket that sat atop our dryer, knowing his clothes were inside. I sighed so deeply. Before me was the last load of laundry I would ever wash for that sweet man. There would be no more dirty socks to pick up around the house ever. A week before, I would have rolled my eyes at that stupid basket. But now, it held priceless treasures. I waited weeks to wash those clothes because my heart ached for the dirty socks to once more be a part of my days again. Those messes dotted around the house are reminders of God's gift to us. Like Jesus, we have the opportunity to demonstrate love by serving those we live with. And last time I checked, not a single person is perfect. How many times had my husband kept quiet, listened, and endured? He shared no list of ways that I needed refinement. He simply loved me. Those clothes were painfully cleaned and boxed away and donated. And the tears were countless. So as we were reading that article together in the car, one, it reminded me of just how selfish I can be, how self-focused I can become so quickly, and neglect the most important person that God has gifted me to be with on this earth, and how our relationship affects so many other relationships as well. And I don't know where you're at today. I don't know where your marriage is, but I know we could all use a little work. I know we can all allow God to come into those places that need his help and fix today, and allow us to be restored back to the people and the couple that we were created to be. Is it easy? No. Is it important? Yes. Each and every one of us have been given a gift from God. And so it's important for us to steward that gift the best we can. And so like I said, I don't know where your marriage is today. I don't know if you want to be married one day, or if you're thinking about it one day, or maybe you've lost a loved one and it's painful and it's hard, but you understand how important this relationship is. And so today I have a challenge for you. For everybody that is married or about to get married or want to pursue a marriage with somebody they're dating, I have a challenge for you I want you to try this week, in hopes that it bring you closer together, using some of the things that God has given us, tools here on this earth to make a difference in our lives. And so I created this week. It's called a marriage challenge. And on it, it's a very simple list of one simple thing to do each day this week. It's nothing crazy on the list. It's very easy to do. And you can find those on our app, on our website today. You can find them out in the lobby. There's a list you can grab. It looks something like this. And you can grab it on your way out. And it's just a simple thing to do this week with you and your spouse to practice some of the things that we're talking about today. Simply praying together, taking a moment during your week to ask God to be with you in your marriage this week. Monday is encouragement. Spend some time encouraging your spouse and telling them some things that you really like about them. Affirmations the next day, writing down various things that you love about your spouse and sharing that list with them. Wednesday is scripture reading, taking the verse that we just read and talking about some of those attributes. Thursday is story sharing, talking about your story and things that make you guys you. Friday is surprise each other. Do something out of the ordinary and surprise your spouse with it. And Saturday is date night. Do something to date each other again. Maybe it's simple, maybe it's not. I put it down a list of things you can try, but just some simple things this week to take what we talked about today and put it directly into practice. Because what I don't want you to do is just hear a great thing or this or that today or be challenged and do nothing about it, because then nothing changes. But I know I need this list, and hopefully you will as well, as we restore our relationships back to where God wants them to be this week. And so if you are married, I pray that you take that challenge this week, and hopefully you'll see God do some incredible work in your life. And as we finish up today, I just want an opportunity to pray for all the couples out there today, no matter where you're at in your relationship, that God would be with you this week, that he would strengthen your relationship, that you would see him do what only he can do. And I pray today that maybe there's a relationship that's just on the cusp of divorce or separation, that maybe something today would give you just an ember of hope that you can keep fighting for this thing. And so let's pray together today and ask God to be with us as we leave. Jesus, I thank you so much for each and every person here today. Lord, I thank you for the establishment of marriage, God, what you put together, what you binded together with people. God, it's hard for us to fathom or understand it, but God, we do know the reward from it. And so God, we choose today to allow you into our lives. Allow us into those places, God, that are hard to give you. And we pray, God, as we do the hard work this week and we focus more on each other and your word and drawing closer to you, God, that you would strengthen our marriages. And God, if there is somebody that's struggling today to barely hold on, God, that you would give them the hope to continue to keep fighting, because we know it's worth it. Lord, I thank you for just our time together. Thank you for your word, God, that instructs us and gives us what we need for another day. And we love you, we praise you, and it's your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Everybody said, amen. Well, thank y'all for being here today. Hopefully that was helpful or beneficial for you couples. Next week, we're going to look at some more relationships that are different, maybe struggling during this time. So come back next week, invite a friend, and we'll see you next Sunday. Have a blessed day.